I've gotten a few messages from people about why I always mention that Lucy Letby is innocent in my videos. And so I thought I would create a video to expand upon why I think that is important, both materially and spiritually. So for those who don't know, briefly, Lucy Letby was a nurse in the UK who was convicted of murdering 7 babies and attempting to murder 7 more on the neonatal unit where she worked in Chester, England. And after her conviction, which was 15 whole life sentences, which means she will die in prison, information came out from experts saying that her conviction was unsafe, that the evidence used against her doesn't make any sense, that it was completely and totally wrong. And so there has been a push to look into her court case and to get her an appeal so that she can be exonerated, because it appears she's innocent. So why do I think this is spiritually and materially important? First and foremost, number one, this is a woman's life. She was in her mid to late 20s when she was arrested, and she's now 36. She's been in prison since 2020. She was convicted in 2023, and she's innocent. And she shouldn't be in prison. It's as simple as that. Her life has been destroyed. And to witness what happened to her in the process is horrifying for all of us, and should be horrifying. And it's horrifying for the families who lost their infants and suffered enough to then be brought into this long court case that was a complete sham. So that's number one. Number two is that all of the people involved in her conviction had something to gain from her conviction. The first being the expert witness who was brought to her court case. He made something like £500,000 for his work. He called the police, the Chester police, who were in charge of her investigation, and said, this is my kind of case. They immediately brought him on. He sought out her case, and they allowed that. And not only did he work with the police, he worked with the prosecution, which is a conflict of interest, if nothing else. And his evidence was completely based on a study that he didn't understand. And after she was convicted, the person who wrote the study that he used came out and said, no, he didn't understand that study. That's just not the case. And then that person led an expert panel of worldwide experts who looked into every single case that she was convicted of, and eventually came out with the fact that none of her convictions were safe, that it didn't look like murder in any of those cases. It was natural death, and that she should be exonerated. And the 2 main consultants at her hospital that pushed for her to be arrested were in charge of the unit where she worked. And she was known to be a whistleblower on that unit because the unit was failing. Babies were dying because there was sewage leaking from the ceiling, so much so that they used diapers to catch it. These are infants that are very, very vulnerable. And they died mostly from sepsis, infection, pneumonia, and not from murder. But these doctors stood to lose from that fact. They wanted their unit to be upgraded. And in fact, it was downgraded because of the nightmare that it was. And it had nothing to do with Lucy Letby, but how convenient that they could pin it on an individual nurse rather than take responsibility for their mistakes, which they still have not done. And the next reason why this is dangerous and why her situation is so important to humanity is because of the institutional failures involved, and the fact that keeping her in prison and putting her in prison covered up for a lot of institutional failure. First, the National Health Service. I don't know that it was a total, scapegoating from their point of view, but I think it's easier to have it be about one individual than about the system as a whole, which is a mess, just like the US system. All medical systems are a mess, financially and organizationally. And so it's easier to have one person responsible than an entire institution. And then the police in Chester and across the world, frankly, but the police in Chester, their investigation was completely biased, completely unintelligent. It was too complicated for them. They couldn't handle it. And they chose to believe she was guilty and then made a case around her being guilty rather than looking into the other options. They just didn't do a full investigation. And they're still patting themselves on the back for what they did. And they put an innocent woman in prison. And then the courts, they don't want to admit that this 10-month-long, very expensive trial may have led to an unsafe conviction. So they're moving very slowly and releasing her. So those are material reasons. And those are worldwide issues. So it's not just about England. It's about the world, and the Western world in particular. But now let's move on to the spiritual reasons why Lucy Letby is so important. So chimps and humans have a very similar genetic background. We're very similar genetically. That's why chimps are used in labs, mice too. But chimps are so close to us that many of our behaviors mimic chimps. And one of those behaviors is the tendency to single out an individual in order to assert dominance, in order to protect territory, and in order to eliminate competition. So our reasons for singling out individuals, which we do as well, if you watch Chimp Empire, you'll see chimps choosing to kill individuals to make a point, basically. Our way of doing this is more advanced, quote unquote. We single out individuals out of fear. Sometimes they deserve it. Sometimes they've done the things that we say they've done, but often they haven't. Often it's coming from some kind of internal structure that requires release. And I'm talking about day-to-day here. I'm not talking about Lucy Letby or institutional failures. I'm talking day-to-day issues. So if somebody has done something that elicits a feeling that we don't like, oftentimes rather than being present with the feeling, we will attack that person. We'll either with words or physically, people will attack and throw the feeling that they have back at the person they think is responsible, rather than perhaps investigating that this feeling has been there all along and that it needs to be looked at. And that's why it's being triggered, and sitting with the feeling and letting the person handle their own behavior, knowing that whatever they did is their problem and how we feel is ours. So we don't usually do that. Usually we feel that attack is the answer. And this mimics chimps in so many ways. And in order for us to evolve, as we did from apes, in order for us to evolve from people to the next thing we're going to be, and to expand our consciousness and become better versions of ourselves, is to make the choice in a way that chimps can't, to decide to come from a conscious, loving place, to decide on compassion. It's not easy. It's not possible to do all the time, but we do have the option to do it, and it's the only choice we have to expand. And how does Lucy Letby play into this? Sorry this is so long, but how does Lucy Letby play into this idea? I'll give my story. That's why this comes up to me. When I heard about Lucy Letby's trial, it was all over the media, all over the world. I'm in the US, but I heard about it. And I immediately believed what was being said. I believed she was guilty. And this feeling of revulsion and disgust rose up in me, obviously, if she killed all these babies. Wow. But it was also something deeper. It was a desire to believe that this was possible and to see that person punished. And I just believed it and never thought about it again, really, because I'm in the US. And then the Netflix documentary came out and I watched it, and I was so excited to watch her burn, to watch the witch burn. My inner chimp wanted to see her burn. And then at the end of the documentary, which is really poorly done, don't watch it. Watch Christopher Norris's Lucy Letby Analysis on YouTube if you want to know the truth and if you want to know the full situation. But once I saw that there was a possibility of her innocence, which is quickly sort of wedged in at the end of the documentary, I was disappointed. I didn't want that. I wanted to continue to follow this burn the witch narrative that had been created. And yet I forced myself. I decided make the conscious choice to see if she's truly innocent, as hard as it was, as much as I didn't want to. And it was hard. I had to force myself to do research and see. And after research, I saw, wow, she really is innocent. She's innocent. She shouldn't be in prison. It's really horrible. And this is an example of making that choice. This isn't to heighten myself or make myself seem like I'm something I'm not. I make the same mistakes everyone else does, obviously, but this is just an example of choosing to consciously be present with the truth of how we're feeling rather than what our brain tells us we should believe and what our genes tell us we should believe, so that we can expand our consciousness, so that we can evolve, so that we can become better versions of ourselves, and so that we can connect more deeply to nature and to spirit.